double time crunch. Keep the elbows bent, stay soft on the joints. Now add that twist, right, left.
What's up, everybody? Last year, I set up this Joroto X2 as a Peloton knockoff to try to build a home gym inside my own home.
Allow myself to introduce myself.
This Giroto X2 has done a great job in our house, and it's been fantastic. I have had no complaints. But just a few weeks ago, my wife picked up this SoulCycle. So I thought we could do a really good comparison head to head. How does my $500, $400 or $500 bike match up to this $2,000 studio bike? So let's start with the seat. The SoulCycle saddle, hands down, beats the saddle that came stock on this Joroto X2. There's just no contest. It feels great. It feels like a racing saddle. It's comfortable for longer rides. It's got a low profile. It kind of lets your bones kind of sit in the right spot. I just have no complaints. So SoulCycle wins on that one, hands down. But that being said, I could throw a nice seat on this bike if I wanted to. I just haven't found the seat that I like. In fact, I might go out and try to see if I can find something more like the SoulCycle seat for the Joroto X2. Next, let's talk pedals. The pedals that came stock on the Joroto X2 were terrible. They're just like these strap-on pedals that actually had reflectors on them. Like I was gonna ride it outside. It was a joke. I put for about $75, I upgraded the pedals, and I have not looked back. They've been fantastic. They're about the exact same pedals that come stock on the SoulCycle bike, but I still like my pedals that I upgraded to better than the SoulCycle pedals. I have loosened up the SoulCycle pedals as much as I possibly can, and they're still really, really tight. So maybe they'll loosen up with a few more rides, but I think I've got a good 10 or 15 rides on this bike, and they're still not getting very loose. So it's just really like stiff trying to get your cleats and your shoes unclipped from that bike. So with a little upgrade, $75 on this Joroto X2, totally worth the upgrade, and makes it, I think, pretty equal to the SoulCycle bike. Next, let's talk adjustability. The SoulCycle has a much wider range of adjustability. You can adjust it for much taller rider, shorter rider, in and out, make that cockpit smaller and larger. I just love how adjustable it is, and you can tighten down every last one of those adjustments so that the bike just feels really solid. The Joroto X2 also is quite adjustable, and it's easy to adjust. I think that you can adjust the Joroto X2 a little bit faster, but it definitely doesn't have the range of adjustability that the SoulCycle bike does. It just doesn't compare. The SoulCycle bike is definitely meant to be in a studio and fit just about any rider that sits on it. Every cyclist has their setup that they like, and you're trying to really get your SoulCycle or your indoor spin bike set up just like your road bike, and that's really hard to do. But I think you have a much closer chance of getting it set up the way you want with something more like the SoulCycle bike, which makes sense. Let's talk stability. On stability, the SoulCycle wins. Not by a lot, but it definitely feels much more professional grade when you're riding on the bike, when you're out of the saddle, when you're really kind of cranking on those pedals really hard. It just feels really solid on the floor. The Joroto X2 feels solid, but when I have looked back at videos, I can tell that it's just got a little bit more wiggle room than I would like for it to have. But maybe I'll see the same thing when I go back through this footage and look at the SoulCycle. But I'll say that I just feel like it just feels slightly more stable to me on the ground than the Joroto X2. The question is it $1,500 more stable? We'll save that one to the end. Let's talk about resistance. I mentioned in my original review of the Joroto X2 that it takes a lot of turns on that resistance knob to really get up to the resistance that you need. So it's kind of nice. You can kind of just keep flicking that resistance knob around and around and just keep cranking it up as you're starting to feel the beat or the music or whatever it might be. But sometimes it feels like I'm really taking a long time to get as much tension as I want. I feel like it takes probably half as many turns on the SoulCycle bike to get up to resistance. So the nice thing is I don't have to just continually spin all the time. I do like the feel of the SoulCycle resistance knob. I think it feels great. I think the resistance, once I got it up there, feels really nice. It pushes back against my feet the way I want it to. So I think it's nicer on the SoulCycle bike to get up to resistance faster than on the Joroto X2. Next, let's talk metrics. The Joroto X2 basically came with no metrics. The computer on it is really, really pathetic. So I've upgraded the computer and I upgraded the Wahoo sensor, so I got a nice cadence sensor. The Wahoo sensor upgrade was an extra $30, and the computer was given to me free by Giroto after they saw my review of their bike. The SoulCycle bike comes with all the metrics that you want. It has a power meter, a cadence sensor, and that's really about it. Those are the big things that you would look for in a bike. But I gotta say, the interesting thing is that SoulCycle doesn't actually tout all the metrics. In fact, I think their whole philosophy behind the bike is much less metrics than a Peloton, for example. Finally, let's talk connectivity. The SoulCycle bike locks you into the Equinox app. That's their whole ecosystem that runs, all their training classes come through on, it's all on this Equinox app. The screen and the speakers on the SoulCycle bike are phenomenal. They do a great job. It's everything that I want it to be. The problem that I have with SoulCycle is that if I buy that bike, I'm locked into that ecosystem. That's the only thing that can be run on that bike. And I don't know that I'm comfortable with that yet. And I'll explain why I think that way in just a second. The thing that I love about my Giroto bike is that I use a TV screen with a Fire Stick TV that lets me run any app that I want. When I'm riding the SoulCycle bike, I really have to ride by myself because the screen is right in front of me. Somebody riding a bike next to me can't really follow my screen. I think one of the coolest things about my Joroto X2 is that I could really afford 2 or 3, maybe even 4 bikes for the same price as a SoulCycle. And then I could have my kids riding with me, right? I don't see all 4 of us riding together at any given time, but definitely I could have me and my son riding together with the TV right here in front of us, and we're sharing in the experience. And the thing that I don't like about SoulCycle is it's really just me, by myself, riding. And sometimes that's nice, but I like to know that I can have the flexibility of having somebody else ride with me if I'm just using a big screen like this. That one really comes down to personal preference. You have to make that judgment call yourself. Let's get beyond the bike. The bike itself really is a much better quality bike than the Joroto X2. I'm still not convinced that it's 4 times the price, but I can say that it's definitely a much nicer experience. That being said, I still ride the Joroto X2 because it still feels great. But when you buy one of these connected bikes, you're really buying the classes. You're buying the experience and the ecosystem that they put you in. And I have some pretty big complaints about the SoulCycle bike. And before I get into it too much, let me just maybe back up and talk about the philosophy of the SoulCycle classes. As I went through some of the classes, I realized that it's not really Peloton. They're not trying to be Peloton. What they're really trying to do is they're trying to be about the music, about exercise and fitness, and just kind of enjoying the time on the bike. So they have things like you get a rhythm score. If you actually kept your feet to the rhythm of all the songs, you get a score at the end of your class. They don't really show the metrics by default. You have to actually bring up the metrics to show them. They don't have a big leaderboard and all those things that Peloton has. It really is meant to be about the music, about the rhythm, about doing some fun moves on the bike. And that's really gonna hit a specific type of rider. And I'm not sure that that's me yet. I tried to keep up with all the rhythms and the moves, the dancing that they have. And some days I was okay. And some days I felt like I was completely uncoordinated. I will say that a lot of the moves made me need to keep my foot speed at really, really high cadences, like 130 to 150 RPMs. And I never ride my road bike or my mountain bike at that high of an RPM. So it felt quite unnatural to me. I'm still yet to figure out if that's going to transfer into me being a better rider down the road, if I can really learn to keep my cadence up nice and high. I do love that with the Joroto X2, I'm not locked into that ecosystem. I really can turn on my TV and download the app that I want. Maybe I found a good spinning instructor that I enjoy on YouTube. Maybe it's Peloton. Maybe it's something on Netflix. I love that I have that option to just run whatever I want to, whenever I want to on the Joroto X2. With the SoulCycle, I really am locked into just the SoulCycle classes. I will say SoulCycle does have a free ride option where I can run Netflix on the SoulCycle screen, which is a nice feature, but I can't run YouTube. Okay, maybe last but not least, I'm gonna be really critical with SoulCycle and Equinox. And maybe not so much with SoulCycle itself because that's the bike, but really with the Equinox app. It hands down is not family friendly. Okay, so if you're looking at purchasing something like this and putting it in your home and letting your kids ride it whenever they want, I have serious concerns. And you can choose and do whatever you want. Let me just make that part clear. the language in the lyrics of the music and the language from the instructors was really not family friendly. I was in one class that the F-bomb was dropped a half a dozen times in the first 5 minutes. Like it didn't sit well with me. I don't really think that that's what I want to put my 12-year-old in front of the TV screen. Now I know some of you are going to say that your kids hear all that at school anyway. And yeah, that's probably true. But I don't invite that and endorse it in my home. One thing I really liked about the Peloton app is I could go through and put on some filters for explicit lyrics, music, and those types of things. And so it is nice with Peloton to be able to do and arrange some of those settings. So could SoulCycle and Equinox fix that? Absolutely. How easy would it be for them to enable their users to filter those types of things out and have some family-friendly classes? I think it's very possible. And maybe they'll watch this video and they'll realize that that would be a really nice feature to include in some of their technology. On top of that, there were some themes in some of the discussions and the things that the instructors were saying that I also didn't like. I also didn't think were family friendly. How hard would it be for those instructors to talk about universal themes and topics like quality books, philosophy, hard work, dedication, like self-mastery, temperance, wisdom, justice, courage? But there was like some sexual type conversations. I just didn't want to have those types of conversations part of my spinning experience or the spinning experience that my kids experience when they're on the bike. Last bit of information I gotta share when I'm comparing both these bikes. If you're a cyclist, there is one app you always use to kind of document your fitness, and that's Strava. And neither of these bikes let you connect to Strava. If you're looking for something along those lines, you're going to have to go to a Peloton because neither of those do it, or you're going to have to track everything on a watch or some other device that sends that information out to Strava. So there you have it, guys. Like I said, for better or worse, these are some of my thoughts on the SoulCycle bike versus my $400 or $500 hack of a Peloton bike that I really have enjoyed for the last year. I have not regretted buying this once. Full disclosure, my wife got this bike for free out of a sponsored video. Hope you guys enjoyed that video. If you thought it was useful, give it a thumbs up. We'll see you in the next video. Thanks.